Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
In the movie Dead Poets Society, a teacher named Mr. Keating, played by Robin Williams, teaches a group of boarding school boys how to take control of their lives, and he does it through poetry. The school's textbook tells the boys to approach poetry through easily graphed means of mathematical equations, how to judge the quality of a poem, and Mr. Keating tells the boys, rip that page out, and sets the stage for the rest of the movie, where he teaches them how to stand up against all the constraints that have been set forth for them by their parents and their other authority figures in their lives. He teaches them to be artists, to be creative thinkers, to think outside the box, which is something that the world around them in this movie really does not appreciate. I'm telling you this not because I think I'm ever going to be your Mr. Keating, but because I want to impart some sense of that same joy and freedom that you experience when watching that movie. The wild nature of the boys once they've embraced it, gathering at night in a cave to recite verse to each other, like it's the most rebellious thing they'll ever do in their lives, and for some of them, sadly, perhaps it is, but not for us. The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold, and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket. December. Frost cracking beneath my steps, my breath before me, then gone, as I walked toward her house, the one whose porch light burned yellow night and day, in any weather. A dog barked at me until she came out pulling at her gloves, face bright with rouge. I smiled, touched her shoulder, and led her down the street, across a used car lot and a line of newly planted trees, until we were breathing before a drugstore. We entered, the tiny bell bringing a saleslady down a narrow aisle of goods. I turned to the candies, tiered like bleachers, and asked what she wanted. Light in her eyes, a smile starting at the corners of her mouth. I fingered a nickel in my pocket, and when she lifted a chocolate that cost a dime, I didn't say anything. I took the nickel from my pocket, then an orange, and set them quietly on the counter. When I looked up, the lady's eyes met mine and held them, knowing very well what it was all about. Outside, a few cars hissing past, fog hanging like old coats between the trees. I took my girl's hand in mine for 2 blocks, then released it to let her unwrap the chocolate. I peeled my orange that was so bright against the gray of December that, from some distance, someone might have thought I was making a fire in my hands. I want to look briefly at 2 moments in this poem, one of which might feel like nothing, and that's the line, "Until we were breathing before a drugstore." It's so evocative to me. It makes me remember being a kid, outside in the winter air with your breath fogging the air in front of you, muffled all wrapped up in your scarf and your hood, just having your breath, the condensation of it, cocooning you in to your own little bubble, your own little world. The poet, Gary Soto, could have worded that line any other way, but he didn't. He wanted us to think about it with those word choices. Until we were breathing before a drugstore, not standing before a drugstore, not waiting before a drugstore, breathing. The other moment that I want to talk about is right at the end of the poem. He talks about the orange in his hands and how it's like he's holding fire. He's just figured out how to get his girl a piece of chocolate that he didn't actually have the money for. He probably really feels like he pulled a fast one, and he probably earned himself a second date with it too. That's today's poem, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me, you poetic little freaks.